I'd like to call the November Policy and Procedure Committee to order, please. Roll call.
Ms. Valerie Bourgeois.
Here.
Dr. Dennis Diop. Here. Mr. Ray Bernard.
Here.
Mr. Richard Booter Jr. Here. Ms. Marion Petita. Mr. Harry LaFont.
Here.
Ms. Cheryl Thomas. The other four.
Number 2, proposed policy revisions, new policies. These first 4 are going to be addressing going for the board, going from 15 members to 9 members. We had some changes that we had to do. So policy ABCA number, and Dr. Diop is going to address these.
So first of all, I want to thank the President, Mr. Bernard, for appointing the ad hoc committee to take a look at that. I want to thank the members that participated in the committee. And luckily, we only had 3 or 4 policies that needed some look. The first one, the adjustment is to strike out 15, the written number 15 and the number 15, and add the 9 written out and 9 the number members. And again, that's throughout the document. So that again addresses the total number of the Lafourche Parish School Board. I so move that we accept.
Second by Mr. Bernard. Any board discussion? Any public discussion? Hearing none, we can vote. And it does pass unanimously. B, policy BBC, board committees.
Okay, thank you again. This one looked at, we had a list of 8 total committees that were listed separately. As the group met, we felt like certain things could kind of be combined and filled in and put in certain areas. And we also added in, it only listed chairpersons, but the last couple of presidents seemed to be wanted to pick co-chairs. That way you always had an individual involved to be able to cover, and especially going down to 3 members on each committee of the 9 members on the board. Probably important to have a chair and a co-chair, that way in case there is absences across. So we felt, as the ad hoc group, felt that was important. So we are looking to adjust from 8 to 3 standing committees. The first one would be Policy and Academics Committee, and it was formerly Policy, Procedure, Academic, Superintendent Evaluation, and Advisory Committees. The second would be the Business Committee, formerly the Finance, Insurance, and Transportation. And the last would remain as it is, since it is such a big item, Land and Facility Management Committee. The remaining portions of the document, go ahead and adjust accordingly based on that list for that. It also identifies special committees as ad hoc committees, and even though special committees would normally be understood as ad hoc, we felt like adding that term was more appropriate, and that would be as needed committees based on the need as it arises. The last section strikes out everything about advisory committee, because that is no longer, again, the committee, the ad hoc committee felt like that because you were going to a 9-member board in the past, it used to look like, and you can see the statement marked through, that there was a member from the north, the central, and the south, along with the president and vice president, thus making that 5 members. The committee felt like when dropping to 9 members, 3 members, how are you going to divide it up through the parish? And so we felt like as needed If there is a need for an advisory, and that's in the next policy or in one of the next policies, that could be created as an ad hoc, as needed to review certain things. And again, we can discuss that when we get to that one. And again, that's what the committee came up with. And so I submit this and move that we accept the adjustment to the policy board committees.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. You need a second? Mr. Bernard, thank you. Also, in any board policy, comments, I'm sorry. Except I wanted to say that. Okay.
Wait, could you bring up the, again, page 1 on top? It could just be me, typical man. Right there in the first paragraph where it says, does it say co-chairperson in blue? Okay.
Go. Okay.
Could be a referee.
Any other comments? I also need to say that besides the committee looking at this, we did send it to the board attorney and they looked at it also. Any public comment? State your name and address.
Buffy Charpentier, 109 Alcide Street, Golden Meadow. It's regarding the representation of the North Central and South district with the 9 members now. Is there intent? I know that Dr. Kiat alluded to the next topic addressing the North-South Central issue. Is there a plan for representation of each segment of the Rouge Parish School District having a member with the 3-member committees, one from the south, one from the central area, and one from the north area? Just in general for the committees going forward, since they're going to be, condensed.
It's something that the president has the option of appointing the members to the different committees. The committees don't necessarily represent the 3 areas. It was just the advisory committee that represented that, along with the president and the vice president.
Okay, so it's only advisory that has currently the stipulation of being represented from all areas.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Let me just say that the president takes that into strong consideration when the committees are assigned. So that's not anything that is not pushed aside. The representation in each area is definitely strongly considered. Okay?
Good. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Jamie Marble, 116 West Lane, Lockport. I have concerns with it because you put some very powerful things that have a large say in our school district into one committee. And if we're not going to be represented throughout the district, and you put, say, 3 from the northern part of the parish or wherever, it's not going to have a say for the people that may have constituents in the central and south Rouge areas if you do everybody from the northern area. My concern y'all should put that specific committee to allow someone from those each individual areas, because then it represents the people equally and what they're facing. If you're going to be on the policy and procedure, the superintendent evaluation, all of those things. Because then you just sit 6 other people out to the sidelines, and if you look down the road, say those 6 don't agree with those 3, you'll never get anything done. And so I feel that y'all should allow or look at it from that perspective for every area of the district, rather than saying, okay, this board president's going to appoint these people, and it's not going to be equally throughout the parish. That's why I really like what the advisory committee procedure had. It was voted by the board in its entirety. It was also people from throughout the district. It wasn't just whoever says, okay, this is where you're going to be. And that leaves the people being represented in an equal whole. And that's where my biggest concern is, because those are the things that are going to impact our students and our staff, the students, the staff, and everybody else the most. well, finance is big too, but that outside of that that's my concern. And I hope y'all would take that into consideration from the perspective of a mom of students in your school district and the people out there, that hopefully y'all will consider that and make that where it's a little bit more representative of the entire parish.
I do have to say that when you're on the committees, the 3 people are the voting members. All of the board is always invited to the committee meetings and can make comments and whatever, but it's just the 3 voting members that bring it to the board, and then the board votes on it. So it's not really a policy until the whole board votes on it. So
Correct.
everybody's represented then.
At that point, but per se that they're not in there with you making that policy as the 3, and it goes to the actual board meeting out of committee, and say 6 people don't agree. That's what I'm getting at, because it's not representative of their area.
Yes, sir.
So some things to consider is that any board member can bring anything to the main board meeting via a request. So things will not die in committee. There hasn't been a situation this past year of something that got voted down in committee and it was brought to the full board and thus passed by the full board. So we took those things into consideration. Again, it looks like there's a lot that's involved in this policy and academics committee, but the superintendent evaluation committee as a point, that could be appointed as an ad hoc committee by the president. Thus, that makeup is going to be special, might not be what the 3 people who are in the policy and academic committee that makeup. You follow what I'm getting at? And so again, I understand completely where you're coming from. I think that's where it's important that you appoint or you vote in people that will be president and vice president that make those judgments and distribute it across. But at no point is anything that comes up to a committee is set to die there if that committee of 3 doesn't agree. If one of those committee members or if the person who initiated that, and again, give an example as a policy, that person can request from the board president that appear at the full meeting. And so that kind of alleviates things like, oh, well, you kind of had a group of, and again, just hypothetical, 3 members from the north, and this policy affected people in the south, right? And so a board member from the south could easily say, hey, I want the whole board to vote on it. And so we took kind of those things into consideration in that. I think challenging and difficult to kind of really separate north, south, and central. With a 15-member board, I think you have more flexibility with that. With a 9-member board, I think we truly have to govern across the parish. And it's been my experience, even at 15, I don't think that we ever shorted one side or the other going forward. I'm not saying it's not possible, because I mean, I believe that, there can be some bad characters that come on the board. But I think this is obviously what we have to recommend. If it's not perfect, guess what? Come February, we can fix it and change it. So, I mean, that's kind of how it works. We can do these things working off the best we can. But again, we did consider a lot of your concerns in that, and that's kind of where we stood with it. So,
Yes, sir.
I just want to, in my almost 2 years on the board, I never saw any type of sectionalism on this board. We all work together for the benefit of the whole of the parish. The only time I ever heard North, South, and Central mentioned was with the advisory committee. Other than that, we never had any of the sectional fighting that you may have seen in other boards throughout the time in the parish. I've never seen that here. And so I would hope that doesn't start, because this board has worked hard for the betterment of all, not just one section.
No, and that's not, I wasn't implying that. I'm looking at it from this side. I'm not looking at it from y'all's side.
You'll be on this side.
You'll be on this side, too.
I know.
You'll be on this side.
But that's what I'm saying, that the outside public, when they're looking at it, looking outside in at what they're gonna see. And to strengthen those relationships between what y'all are doing here, what they're down trickling, the trickle down effect into the schools, into the public, that, you know, that it can come out, well, all those people are from, I'm just saying, I'm not saying anybody's saying this.
I understand, that has existed, I understand that.
And to me, it's kind of like if we kept it the same and everybody was like, no, you're represented and this is agreed on as a whole, like public perception, rather than, oh yeah, that board president, he sure loved them people from the, I'm just saying, but that's where my concern comes from. It's not to belittle y'all or to say y'all weren't working hard or anything like that. It was, my perception comes from this side right now.
I understand that, but I think that for us to move forward, not only as a school district, but as a parish, we need to work to overcome that.
That was going to be my comment also, is that we work as a whole board for the whole parish. We don't be sectional.
That's our role.
We gotta look at it also with other boards. We're not fighting for money for solid food. That's what we should leaving Thibodeau out. You know, we all worked as one as a whole. So it's for all the students. We weren't fighting for money to just go one school. Okay.
Yeah, the board comment.
I respond with it. I just want you to know it's not looking at it from like the money perspective. It's looking at it from the perspective of policy. Parents want change. They want different things to happen. And what may be happening in South Lafourche, I'll use Ida for example. Some of the challenges South Lafourche may be facing, Thibodeau may not be facing. And they want to feel like they have a voice that's there speaking for them. Although y'all are doing it from the heart and doing it to represent the whole, that it makes the people feel better when they're doing that. So I want you to understand, Mr. Ryan, it had nothing to do with distribution of money or funds. It was more about what the people would want.
Madam Chairman, go ahead, Ray.
And when I said money, it was an example.
I
Just
just wanted
like
to
you
make sure
stated as an example also. It was an example that I used. That's what other boards' main purpose.
Well, the last thing I would say is I fielded calls from across the parish. And I don't not talk or listen or try to see the other sides. I mean, I've done that. I'm sure other board members have done that. And that's the expectation.
Let me just say the advisory committee is not a governing, doesn't have no governing power whatsoever. It's there to offer opinions and advice and insight. And as such, that's the way we need to approach it.
Another board comment.
That y'all would be doing the rest of the board. So if the advisory committee is not made up of people from the entire parish or from all the districts, how is it that you understand completely what that community is thinking? Give the advice that comes from that community as a whole, so the board can make the best decision possible for everyone. It's only restricted to members that may be from an entirely separate area.
Chairman, thank you. Just want to make a statement where that any committee that's present or formed or whatever, if they're insider advice, any board member on that board didn't come to those meetings. If you disagree with anything that's being discussed that night or at that time, it is your right to speak up on behalf of those representatives, those citizens out there that has no voice. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I am Shanna Ellen Hurst, 466 Crossing North Street. And I'm just curious why it seems like if this is something that would affect the board that's starting next month, that it would be something because 4 of the of the 9 board members will be new. I would just think that it would be something that the new board members would vote on, since they're the ones that are going to be, doing this, is what I was thinking in my mind. Is
You get to get it done before the board takes place so that we can move forward. Because it had to be in committee, it had to go to the attorney. You couldn't wait until the 9-member board was already, that was part of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Any other comment? I can't hear you.
I'm just trying to understand, like, why? Is it because you're going down between 3 on each, you have a large number of committees, and you want to get it down, so I'm assuming you don't have to be here as often, or, that's how my mind's working, why it has to go down to combining them all like that. Was it just make it easier, or was it just, I'm trying to follow that part of it.
A lot of members will be serving on several committees. You can't do more than 3, because then you would have a representation of the board, and then you would have a meeting, so you couldn't do that legally. You can't have more than 4 or 5. 4 was the number you had to have 4 or less.
So, appreciate your question. So, we will try to find the most efficient way. It's not going to be any easier because you're talking about 9 from 15 to 9. So, so the concept is that we would plan to meet one day out the week. We know land and facilities agenda could be a whole day by itself, a whole evening by itself. So as far as the logistics of how it's offered and when it's offered, we just know that when you were functioning within the quorum and max number of board members, you couldn't have 5 members, obviously, because then you make a quorum of the whole board. So you can't do that. And so our thinking is, and again, it's at the pleasure of the president, but there would be 3 voting members. And again, that could be, if we really wanted to veer for it, a north, a central, and a south member on each of those 3 committees. Of the 9 people would be on one committee, dealing with all the things that are kind of encapsulated into those committees. We just felt like it would be efficient like that. Again, come February, 9-member board wants to revisit it. I'm open for that. I have no problem with that. Maybe there's a better way. However, I think based on policy, you needed to have something about 9 members now going into January when you start, because it's just cleaner when you do that.
No, I was just going to say exactly what Dennis just said. If it doesn't work, you can always change it.
And we also, right now, we all serve on 3 committees. So if you're going to serve on one, those 3 committees were going to be condensed into one committee. So you actually were still serving on those 3 committees, but now it's one committee. Yes, ma'am.
So if you look at this, there's not always business for every single committee. So by adding and putting this together, you run a little bit more efficiently as far as when it's out and everybody can be here. Even though the committee only consists of 3 people, for meeting all of the committees on the same night, more than likely the entire board will be here. So anyone who has a comment, a question, or something their opinion, that's how they have the option.
I'd just like to make one more comment. So if at any point you felt like, any of the 9 felt like that there was not representation, you could volunteer to president. The president can still appoint you. You just would not be a voting member. But again, we've already made the point that you can attend any and all meetings, and more than likely we'll probably be trying to at least get 2 of these out the way on a day. And again, most people would be here and stick around and do that. Not a perfect science, but we're working to get there.
Let me just say, the purpose of the ad hoc committee was we felt that to get our new board up and running immediately and not have to address different policy changes, that everything would be in place and they could get to work immediately. And I agree that if there is some concerns about what we felt would benefit the new board needs to be changed, and that's in yours power to get together and change.
Any other comments? None? Let us vote. Vote is C, policy BC, school board meetings.
The only change on the meetings document was, believe, 2 years back, we had put in a seating chart, so that way the seating stayed consistent. And because we're not going to have representation of an advisory committee members that used to be seated at the base of the U or horseshoe that we're in, so we're just striking out advisory committee members from this policy. That is the only change, and I so move that we adjust accordingly.
Second by Mr. Ewing. Any comments from the board? Any public comment? Hearing none, we can vote. B, policy B, I, public participation.
Right, so the adjustment on here was that if ever there was an individual or a group that wished to be placed on the board's agenda, the advisory committee that was in place would review the information and determine if they had not necessarily a right, but a right or a privilege to present in front of the board. And so the committee felt like changing that to executive ad hoc, because this is not a usual occurrence. So it could be created in an as needed basis. Again, that would be the president. And I'm sure the president, whoever they are, would take a recommendation to have somebody throughout the parish. So this document didn't specify how that would be. Again, an ad hoc is as needed at the pleasure of the president to service a specific need for a limited time period. And thus, so that's where that language came in to be used as an executive ad hoc to review any of those. The last thing I would point out, again, if a parent or some constituent has a request, they can make a request through a board member, and that board member can then request an item be placed on the agenda, regardless of this review policy that would be in place or ad hoc committee. So that's the change, and I so move to make that adjustment.
Any other board comment? Any public comment?
So I kind of addressed this earlier. When you go and review and read, and I didn't read it in the meeting handbook and all, but ad hoc means like a temporary committee. And every time someone wants to get on the agenda to speak, we're going to assign a temporary committee. Like that's where I'm confused with the wording, and because you're saying the executive portion of it. So I'm trying to understand, because when I think executive, I think of how right now, if Joe Blow Public wants to come and speak, they go through Mr. Bernard and Mr. Martin and send them the email requesting it, and sometimes you get a response or a phone call and they let you know that yes or no. And so that is like what I'm looking at. Like y'all would, I'm using today's terms, that Mr. Martin and Mr. Bernard make up that committee. Like that's kind of where like clarity would be good, because when Joe Blow Public wants to come in and speak, that's how we have to do it. Now, is this for like people that are coming in like for the project Miss Jimmy had when she brought in the lady to speak and all? Is that like greater than that, or how's it going to work? Because it really doesn't talk about how that committee is going to work.
I believe this is specifically, if you read the A, B, and so on, this is about getting an item on the agenda. That's really all this, addressing this is about. My understanding is this has not been something that has been common practice. And so it used to go to the advisory committee meeting. And so thus, conceivably, at the president's appointment and discretion, he or she could appoint an executive ad hoc, and it could be a different executive ad hoc depending on what the request is. Our thinking is that I might not be the best person to be on that ad hoc committee based on the content of what that topic is. Maybe it's an area that it was my constituent. So then again, maybe I am the best to be on that. And so I think the flexibility is there. I think if we get ourselves pigeonholed on some things, again, this could be a developed thing, that if it looks like, hey, a lot of people are looking to put items on the agenda, then maybe we need to relook at it. But again, I know that the true policy is there, and I believe it states, I thought it was somewhere at the bottom that you could, again, get a board member to request an item. And so with that flexibility, it's, you know.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Just like I said, I could come from a perspective, and that perspective was always through Mr. Bernard and Mr. Martin for something to be added to the agenda from the public. So that's why I was like.
Well, and my understanding is Mr. Bernard did use his advisory committee meeting frequently throughout the year. I'm not sure because I wasn't on it exactly what was covered, but I know they met at least about 6 or 7, 8 times.
About 7 times.
7 times throughout. So, and again, if you look back, during our last 4-year term, some presidents chose not to have advisory committee meetings and just chose to send things on to the agenda. Right. Yep, you bet.
What Dr. Giat says, and if any request to a board member, and that board member can bring it, and it could be a request from a person who's not even your constituent, it's someone outside your district. You can contact you, say, I need something to get on there, and the board member can do it.
Any other comments? You can vote.
If I may, again, I want to thank the committee for their work. I want to thank President Bernard for appointing us and getting us. I think this will help the 9 members kind of get cranking and started, because I know it was my experience that we had a new superintendent that came in and we had a lot of things in. So I think we're going to be better suited as a 9-member board going forward, not having to have a new superintendent and those types of things. So again, the best thing to do is something's not working, we can always bring it to the full board and get it adjusted, fixed, make it work for everybody. Again, thank you, and thank the members of the committee.
Just want to echo thanks to the ad hoc committee. Appreciate that. And the purpose, as I've already said, was to get the new board off and running. We hope that once these policies are presented at the December meeting, they will be approved by the full board. And as the new members take over in January, that everything will be set in order and changes need to be made. Of course, they have that opportunity. Thank you all.
Yeah, whoever else was on the committee, I want to thank you for doing this and everything, because you took extra time and all this to do this. I just wonder where y'all was at years ago.
Well, so the members were, Chairman Bourgeois, Ms. Babin, and Ms. Fertitta, and myself.
On to B. Sorry, E. Policy IDDFC, cameras in special education classroom.
This session of the legislature, they passed Act 588, which revised our original law, stating that it was mandatory that each school board adopt procedures for cameras in special education classrooms. And so the changes that we have made to the policy to reflect that, it's also been reviewed by our attorney. And I'm asking that the policy committee approve this and bring it to
Thorough job.
this is the easy part.
I know the next one. I need a motion. Bernard, seconded by Dr. Bernard. Any other board comment? Public comment? None, we can vote. It is unanimous. 1, 2, F. To consider approving the procedures implementing Louisiana Revised Statute 171948 as per policy IDDFC, cameras in special education classroom.
So we developed those procedures and the explanation for parents, the district staff, and then also created the forms on each step. So the request, and if you chose to pull that request from the of having a camera in the classroom, if you wanted to, if you have an incident that you were suspecting, there's a form for that, as well as a form to fill out if you're requesting to see the video and those proper procedures, when and where and times that would take place, as well as timetables of when it would allow the district to be able to have the cameras actually installed. So that is what I'm proposing. Any other questions? I mean, that's pretty much to highlight. Most of these are the forms that we would track to make sure that we were addressing all parents. Defined all the terms. This has also been approved by our attorney, and I am requesting to
By Dr. Dion, seconded by. Okay. You understand?
I am now. I won't be in a month, but right now I am.
You couldn't second it.
At first, I said yes, and then my name wasn't up, and then they put my name up. So I thought maybe I made a mistake.
You confused me when you did that.
Oh, I confused
Seconded by Mr. LaFawn.
I confused a lot of people, Chairman Bourgeois.
Any more on the board comment? It's my fogginess tonight. Any other public comment? Hearing none, you can vote. Thank you, committee, for this.
Thank you.
A lot of work. It is unanimous. On to 3, proposed job description revisions. A, Consider approving a revision to the child nutrition cafeteria technician job description.
Good evening, Superintendent Martin, Chairperson Bourgeois. This was a request that the Director of Child Nutrition, Fletcher, requested. Currently, it is becoming extremely difficult to hire child nutrition technicians in the current labor market. So in the job description, you see there that they have, the recommendation is to remove the requirement of the high school diploma or GED and the 1 year of experience in the child nutrition area. So I'm asking for
Motion by Mr. Bernard, seconded by Dr. Young. Any board discussion? Public discussion. Hearing none, if you vote. Any other business that you want before this committee? If not, meeting is adjourned.